tonight, which is really fine, and really glad that folks are joining us. So yeah, thanks for calling in. So this is our the fourth Tuesday of the month. That means for the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition, it is our fight against data-driven policing monthly community meeting, which for right now, they are still being held online. And yeah, so we're excited to be meeting here with folks tonight. Sorry, my name is Tiff. I skipped that part. And here is Comrade Slim as well. Welcome. We're just getting started. My name is Tiff. I use they and them pronouns. Please would be glad to have you if you'd like to use the chat to introduce yourself. You do not have to either. We're just glad to have folks joining in any capacity. Definitely use the chat kind of throughout the conversation to just or like raise your hand, or it is like a small enough group of us that we could probably just indicate or just like unmute ourselves and just comment that way as well. So please definitely participate as you like throughout the conversation. So yeah, as far as the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition, as I mentioned, this is our fourth Tuesday meeting. We do have other Tuesday night meetings that folks may or may not be aware of. On the first Tuesday night of the month, that is our meeting for looking at surveillance through the lens of gender and sexuality. Folks are welcome to join us for that one as well. The second Tuesday of the month is the fight against the war on youth. That is open for folks to join as well. And then the third Tuesday is when we have our general coalition meeting where we come together and generally talk about a topic, one kind of main topic. And that's a chance for us all to come together on that evening as well. So folks can join any of those. Also within each of these fights that we're talking about, we also have working groups, which we're going to be hearing a little bit more from tonight. I'm going to be hearing about two of the working groups and actually more than that within our fight against data-driven policing. Folks can join those as well. So just let us know if you're interested in learning more. They meet at different times. We understand folks have kind of a varying range of capacity, a range of ways that folks can plug in. So definitely just get in touch with us and let us know if you're interested in joining. And yeah, we'd love to plug folks in. And I'll just pause. I think we're having one moment. Okay, I just need to get my water there. Thanks so much for joining us, folks. We're just getting started. So as far as the agenda, what we're going to get into now is we have, I think, three main things on the agenda today. We're going to start out by getting an update from our Defund surveillance group. And we have Brother Pancake joining us as well. Welcome, folks who are just joining. We're just getting started on the agenda, and glad folks can join. So as far as the agenda, yeah, we'll start by checking in with our Defund surveillance group. That's a group that has been meeting about every week, and this is a good one for us to be taking a look at anytime, but it's especially timely now, as we know it's getting towards November, which is when LAPD will be releasing its proposed budget for the year, what it is asking for the budget for next year. So we'll get to have a look at that and push back on it. So we'll be checking in with the Defund surveillance group. So I'll be passing it over to Matios and folks for that section in just a bit, well, very soon actually. And then after that, we're going to go into a little bit more of a deep dive, which is something that we've been doing within that group, is we've been kind of doing a deep dive on like usually like a type of technology, learning more about it. So learning more about it as well as how much LAPD is spending on it. And in this case, we're actually going to be looking at a tech company. We're going to be taking a look at Axon and how LAPD's relationship with Axon, which used to be TASER International, has developed over the years, and how that has impacted the budget. And we'll kind of talk about a few different things with relation to that as well. And then we'll kind of round it out with any additional updates from other working groups that we, I think, have present or that we care to update on. Kind of leave it open-ended like that. So yeah, so any questions, folks? How are we doing? Does that sound good? All right. Yeah, and again, please just like chat or cool, sounds good. Ask questions as we go along. It's all good. All right. Matios, I think or it might be Naoko.
I'll
but
kick it off.
There you go. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Thanks so much for that introduction, Tiff. What's up, everybody? My name is Matios. I use he, him pronouns at the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition. So glad y'all showed up. Pleased to see LA Can folk in the house. I'm looking at you, Brother Pancake. And I just want to shout out that Brother Pancake made a cameo on the Kelly Clarkson show today, and so did some other folks from LA Can. Y'all should check it out. It's online. But yeah, so the Defund Surveillance Work Group came together about a couple years back now, I guess, to kind of discuss the budgeting process here in Los Angeles, to delve a little bit deeper on the LAPD's ever increasing budget and kind of figure out ways we could kind of figure out what aspects of the budget, LAPD's budget specifically, has been expanding, and like what that process kind of looks like. And so that work group, largely in collaboration with the Free Radicals, created a great zine called Budget Creep, which I'm going to paste into the chat, and people should check it out. And the zine kind of covers some more, I guess, like egregiously gross aspects of the LAPD budget, but also some of the mechanics of how that budget comes about and how it's grown. It's got a really creepy picture of Garcetti on the cover that I'm quite fond of because I feel like it captures his essence. And in the process of creating that budget, the coalition actually, oh yeah, and there was definitely a site that was launched as well. Thank you, Tiff. So folks should check that out. But in the process of working on that, the coalition had put in a public record request for LAPD's budget documents for 14 years worth. They wouldn't give it to us, so the coalition sued and got those documents, and they gave us 14 years of base budget docs as raw PDFs. So that's what we've been working with, just these very gross, very raw PDF files of the budgets. They're large. We don't know if they're complete or not. And so a large chunk of the work that we've been doing is trying to turn these PDFs, these word line item documents, into like tangible data we can kind of analyze and share with folks and like get meaning from. And so in the beginning, we were kind of doing that manually, where we were taking these line items and manually inputting them into Excel sheets. And from those insights that we find and data that we pull, creating popular education material that you may have seen, one mapping how much body-worn video, how much money was spent on body-worn video from the LAPD budget. Another one that talked about ALPRs, automated license plate readers, or automatic license plate readers, as they say in 1 year of the budget docs. And so, yeah, I think recently Naoko has kind of figured out a format through using Tableau to kind of both illustrate this data and bring it to life and visualize it in different ways, but also make it more malleable in a sense, and like to explore a little more easily and to search. So we're kind of gonna present the ways in which we've been looking at it, and we want to show that to you. We want to show the work Naoko has done in doing that. But another thing that we want to do is we want to solicit your input as to like what presentation you feel is most effective, what you want to see, what you want to know, what part of this budget you want to find out about. If you have any questions about what's inconsistent, what's consistent, yeah, we just really want to know how this can best serve the community, you all. So that's kind of what we're looking for. But before that, I'm going to pass it over to Naoko. Does anybody have any questions about anything I just said, or the Defund Surveillance Zine, or any of the work we've done? Cool. And if you do, just drop it in the chat. I'll reply. But I'll pass it over to you, Naoko.
Hey, I'm Naoko, she, they. I also want to shout out Bria for helping put together some of the Tableau views that I'm about to show right now. So I think a good place to start off with, oh, can you enable screen sharing? Cool. Okay, is with what the actual documents look like when they got them from that PRA. So it shows the adopted monitoring report for like this year, and then all of them have different run dates or different I guess days that they put together these docs. So there's like a little bit of inconsistency within the documents themselves, but we took these, cleaned the data, moved them into a table, and then concatenated all the years together to make one spreadsheet that we could then use for some of them. And then you can see that for each row, there are different columns. So there's some that are identifiers. So the account, sub-account, serial number, and then this X or A column that I don't really know what that is. And then mostly we used this budget column, but in addition to that, there's these different ones that talk about like surplus, deficit, adjusted, and so on. So maybe those would be useful to look into, but I'm not an accountant and don't really know too much of what they meant. Yeah, so this is some of the views that we put together. So the data source is all those PDFs that were joined together into a CSV. So that's what's feeding what you see now. These show some of the relationships. So they call it out in the documents themselves. So if anyone has insight into what these different fields mean, maybe they could be useful. And there's just different ways of viewing them. So you can like turn on and off different fields. And so then we can move into, oh, and just to kind of reiterate what Matthias was saying, one of like the big things about this is that we want to see what questions folks have that we can look into using this data. So if anyone has anything, feel free to say it or drop it in the chat. And then here's just on a very like high level, the total budget per year. And we're not sure if these budget docs are complete. So the numbers don't necessarily match what we read on LA Times or other newspapers. This is just something that we noticed when we saw this drop. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, this is just a perfect example. I'm sorry, Naoko, I didn't mean to interrupt you. But you know, so this is the total sum of the entire budget doc that they gave us year to year. And you'll see that there are dips here, like especially right there from 2019 to 2020, which would imply that the LAPD had been defunded or had lost funding or their budget had decreased in some sense. And we know that to not be the case, which kind of lends us to believe that you know, these documents aren't complete. And this is, you know, from the total sum of the budget that's explicitly listed on the PDF document. So it's not even something that could be kind of misconstrued or lost in transitioning to this format. So just another one of those inconsistencies to point out.
Yeah, and then breaking it down, we can look at like by line item, we can see what's gotten the most. So the sum over 2007 to 2020 has been auto, and then we can see other ones as well. And then we can also break that down to by a certain year. So if we look at 2017, we can see that the amount of money that was spent on body worn videos jumped up. In 2016, it's not even one of these bigger ones, and then, or I guess it's here for 1.9, and then here it jumps up. And then we can also look, this is just a different way to show the same thing. So this is like for that specific year, 2017, but we could also do all the years. And then when we compare years, we can just, look at how did it change from 2017 to 2018 or whatever we want to do there. And then one thing that we can see is that sometimes they'll just change the line item name. They'll just change it by a little bit. And so that's just one thing to be aware of if we were to look into this data a little bit more. And then I think the main reason, or like the reason that this initially started, was to kind of look into specific items. So this allows us to just look at anything that includes, for example, in this one, license. So this is if we're wanting to look at like those AL or PRs that Matheus was talking about earlier. So this is how much that they had spent on those specific things. So if anyone has ideas on what to put in, but I think some things that we've seen are how much money is spent on like community relations fund. This one is on MacArthur Park specifically, half a million. We can look at TASER. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I didn't mean to cut you off, Narco, I'm sorry. But no, I just wanted to point out, with the tree map format earlier, we saw that big block on 2017 for body worn video. And that's when that reform came in. That's why it was such a big block line item. And I think it's interesting in this screen, when you had typed in community, we saw that big bar graph for MacArthur Park. I forget the full name, but it had to do with MacArthur Park community vendor market. So, I wonder what that is. And I wonder, like, I'm personally curious to see if that was some kind of LAPD subsidized or partnered, like street vendor permissibility area, just because we know in the past few months that the LAPD, along with the Department of Public Health, have raided MacArthur Park, criminalizing street vendors. So it'd be interesting to see how long that's been an area of focus for them. And clearly that's been an area of financial allocation. So that does seem to be, like something that indicated that the LAPD would pay attention to MacArthur Park in relation to street vendors. I'm not sure that made sense. It's just interesting where the money goes and where the LAPD ends up going.
Yeah, I think that's all I have. If folks have questions or anything they're curious about.
Hey, I had a question. So for that yearly sum graph, that was sort of tracking that dip, I think. So are you saying that essentially like the reports that were given should have summed up to greater than, I think it was like 96 million or something like that, but they didn't? And like their budget was clearly over 96 million, but these reports that we're getting are not adding up essentially?
No, do you mind if I jump in? Yeah, yeah, Ryan. So effectively, yeah, we're saying there should be more money. And so
Gotcha.
the PDF for that year 2019, and maybe we can pull it up. It lists the amount on that bar graph, but that's less than the amount we know the city allocated to the LAPD for that year. And even 2020, where we see the dip, where I think, yeah, so 96. I think 2020, it was about 110 million that was allocated to the LAPD, or, I can pull up the exact number, but yeah, it should be more.
Mhm.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I wasn't aware that there was like a grand total for each year. I thought it was like summing up all the different months or something like that, but that makes sense.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember now, and I think this is something, I feel like, Matios, this is something that we discussed in that zine that was created. Like, am I right that there's like, that this was one of the complexities of getting these documents in the first place, was like, it was so confusing, and there was like a base budget and then whatever this is. And the base budget is like a big chunk that gets carried over, like, I can't remember, but it's like, so when they responded to us with documents, they only gave us like, I forget how they, I'm gonna have to go back and refresh my memory, but they only gave us like a certain type. I'm not sure. I need to refresh my memory, but I remember that this was a challenge when they first started giving us documents, was we were like, well, this can't be all of them. Like, yes, we're very interested in what you gave us. But it was like, yeah, we were like, what about, and I might not be using the right term when I say base budget. That just sounds right to me. Like, there's like a base that they're, because we know that it's like, because isn't it like, it's like over $3.2 billion a year or something like that? So then it's, yeah. But then the only part that they release they only release a certain amount of that in detail, and the rest of it just gets rolled over. And that's where, yeah, I think you're right, Naoko, is where we were like, okay, maybe we can have accountants engage with us on this as well, to kind of discern, because we were definitely like, we have a lot of interest in the documents that we have received and kind of how those change, and those are giving us like a certain view, I think. But I don't quite understand why it's like, I don't quite understand how the whole thing fits together. So
Yeah,
did any of that make sense?
no, it did. And I think that's the confusion right there, because we sued for base budget docs, and those PDFs actually list like surpluses and deficits, right? If there's any, like if there's money left over. So our thinking is that the whole of that annual allocation should reflect what was allocated to the LAPD, because that on the side includes yeah. Yeah. So but all this to say, I think we were inundated with 14 years worth of budget documents in a PDF format because they don't want us to make sense of it, right? I think
Right.
it's intentionally made difficult. But even with that, we've been able to pull some pretty astounding information that we know is an undercount. So I think just around like body worn video and automated license plate readers, we were able to find sums that we know are on the low ball of what the LAPD are on the low end of what the LAPD have actually spent. And maybe we can pull some of that now. No, I don't know if you can pull it up by line item or
Yeah, are
for,
we able to do searches right now? Because that would
Yeah.
be really cool.
If you have like a keyword or a phrase, or
I
even
think you were showing us body worn video, right? Is that what you were showing us? Because that was a really interesting one. Because we're going to be talking about like Axon right after this, and like how LAPD's relationship with Axon has grown, and like growing is a good word for it as we're looking at these, so this is just body worn. This is just anything that matched that keyword body worn video. Okay. I mean, that's already quite something. Oh, okay. So that is different. Okay. And what are these different okay, so the different categories are different things, different,
There are different titles, like the line item was called something different. But it can be like misleading sometimes because they'll just change the name, but it's still the same. But in this case, whatever is coming afterwards might mean something.
wow, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, we actually manually totaled out that one. And I think we even looked at the controller's site. And there was a slightly larger amount there, but it's been about 68 million since their rollout that the LAPD has spent on body worn video since the 2016-2017 budget.
Wow. Yeah, do folks have any questions or I know I'm talking a lot. Ray?
Yeah, I'm wondering how many, it would be kind of interesting to see what the police force, how many people would be using these the videos, the body worn videos, and see if it's increased or not. Yeah, it's interesting. I think some of these category, that's my first sort of question. The second comment in trying to make sense of this graph that's shown now. First of all, thank you, Matios and Nayoko, about with the work that you're doing on this and the presentation. This is awesome, great work. And obviously more work needs to be done, but making sense of, you know, the jigsaw puzzle is like the first step. But what I'm wondering about are these categories up on top for body worn video system -TTS, and then the other one said CESL for whatever, SES, LF, whatever that is. Is there a consistency going across? Because I think that one of the other sections had the same TTS for different years. I'm just kind of curious whether these are different systems or, I mean, different categories or the same category for different years, or is that something that you're still working with?
Yeah, they seem to be departments within the LAPD or designations for that budgeting. And they often do relate to an account number that's not listed here. But yeah, we're still trying to figure that out. And honestly, that's a good idea for like a PRA, like a very simple one, like yeah, spelling out those initialisms.
Do you have sort of a general count of how many different budget categories there are overall? I mean, or have you sorted those out into like major categories and then the subsets to those categories? Or is that what I'm seeing on the left-hand side? I kind of don't think so. I know that on the right-hand side where it says CS title assignment, you can do a search, but I think I saw a drop-down menu before that has kind of all a bunch of categories. I'm just kind of wondering how widespread. Oh, thank you, Matias, for that, for the definition. Yeah, I'm just kind of wondering. I mean, what a big pie chart would look like, and then maybe breaking down each segment of the pie chart, kind of thing, kind of idea. And I'm also wondering how vast is. I mean, is this money being filtered? I mean, obviously the divisions and subdivisions of the police department are pretty complex, or at least there's numerous ones. And I'm just kind of wanting to feel the gravity of how much this money is, how widespread it is, and I guess how it's pilfered into all these different cubby holes. So just kind of wanting to get sort of that kind of sense, the overall landscape. Thanks.
No, thank you, Ray. We haven't broken it down by account number. That is a line item. There's a definite account number designation, and those are somewhat consistent through the years. And so that'd be a great idea to break it down in that way. So that's exactly the type of column we can maybe add to see that. In regards to how they use it, there's never been a substantial audit of the LAPD's budget. So like, I don't think they know. So I wonder like how much of this is actually just Mickey Mouse, because they know they're sure to get more resources. But that's exactly the type of thing we want to find out. And yeah.
Yeah, and each one does have an account number, but I think like I don't know what it means. I think that's probably the more difficult thing right now. So even if you group them together, it's kind of like, oh, on what are you grouping them together? But maybe there's like a key somewhere.
I'm also wondering about if we could get off the website or through some other source, the LAPD organizational chart, and maybe projects that they have, or even from other documents that that you have access to from a request of, what is it, the CRA. So, and I guess triangulate money to each of these sort of divisions or whatever.
Yeah. So yeah, and Tiff, I don't know if you want to talk about that, but we have done some of that already, like specifically around, we've been looking to other aspects of we've turned to these documents to inform other aspects of our work around how much funding like helicopters and vehicles get. And so we have been able to kind of guess at like line items that may be designated to major crimes or different departments based on different initialisms. But again, the trouble is there are inconsistencies from year to year. Like things change up, just like line items. So you can't be, that's something we've been kind of gaming at, but again, that can do with some collective effort and collective research too. Tiff, I don't know if you want to, if you have any thoughts on that.
No, I mean, I'm just thinking, just like looking at all this and these, and these questions, and this isn't the first time that we've looked at budget docs, and I'm just thinking like how much this really is like an ongoing effort, and how powerful it could be. Like it's already powerful as a community-based effort, and that was the intention in getting the documents, was in saying, why is this so hard? Like, why is it so hard to get documents on the LAPD budget that give us details on what you all have? Just how powerful that would be to have that kind of, because it does take time to kind of develop that understanding of like, yeah, what are all these different account numbers and what does that mean? But it is just a matter of time and getting familiar with the different things and getting in touch with different folks and kind of building that knowledge. So I was just thinking how powerful that would be to kind of develop that over time and have that understanding and be able to speak to it just really clearly, which which folks are already doing, but like, yeah, that would just be really great. And yeah, so that's just what I was thinking about.
One thing I would like to see, and I'm sorry, Tiff, we can get to the Axon stuff, but if we could look up Palantir, because I'd love to see how much money. Yeah, okay. So it looks like it's just a 2019 and 2020 contract. There's 1.96 in 2019.
Easier to pick up and lift it and blow up onto the land than it is.
Yeah,
And
really odd.
I think what's interesting instead of that, and I know y'all have been doing some of this work with Peter and the architecture of surveillances. So, they've allocated about 3.7 mil to Palantir total, but then if you look at, Malco, if you could look up records management system. So yeah, we see more money being poured into that, and it's not reflected here, but we know they just dropped that. I think it was a Motorola contract, right? An expansion to yeah.
Yeah, which is a multi-million-dollar contract. Yeah, and the Palantir was that was a lot of money as well, and that would have spanned over time. So now I'm just wondering again, like, thinking about like, yeah, going back to the documents that we received.
Because what year was that? The target donate, was that like 2007 or later?
I believe I believe it's like cited in the media as being around 2007. There hasn't been, it doesn't show up on any police commission meeting agenda. It doesn't show up in city council as a donation. Like, it's not on any of their agendas. So it's actually really hard to figure out when exactly that, well, it can't be that hard to figure it out, because they would, there would be some documentation internally, but in terms of like looking for those external things where it should have been approved or passed through council, a donation that large, it's not, I can't find that anywhere. And I've also noticed, like, when media reports on it, they're also unable to find that. But yeah, it's been at least a decade that Palantir has been used. And I believe one of the reasons that they were trying to get away from it was because it was extremely expensive. But anyway, so yeah, so I
Yeah,
think, yeah, this just tells us yeah.
and the reason I ask is because that's exactly the type of thing, 2007, you'd expect at least one line item on it in between now or then in 2020. But, we only see two line items for. And the reason I brought up the records management system is because this is something Peter had, brought up. And he even ties it to, they even tie it to Palantir in their write-up of the records management system, which I believe we have on our site, and I'll find a link for and drop. But is that LAPD has been expanding their records management system to serve the same function that Palantir has, and has been investing way more money into it. And we see that over these years and in these docs. So just wanted to highlight that.
Yeah. And I think they've been very effective so far in kind of getting away from that, association with Palantir. Like with the records management system, they're not even classifying that as being associated with data gathering or surveillance. Like, they're like, oh, it's just a records management system, when really what we know from, talking with Peter and talking with that group that's working on that is that it's much more than that. And it actually is a lot more like Palantir in terms of like the way that it pulls information and makes associations between data points. It's not just like, oh, it just is, storing records and pulling things together. It's actually like engaging in looking for patterns and making predictions about things as well. So, yeah, so they've been very successful in that, kind of transitioning away from that. But that's part of our job, is to talk about how it's not that.
Absolutely. And so did folks have, Ray, I really appreciate the suggestion about delving into the different accounts and maybe mapping those out individually, because they are listed. So, and I feel like that's something within the scope of this interface that'll be easily done. But I'm wondering if folks have any other suggestions, even on ways to like visualize this, like even juxtaposing it to I don't know, different aspects of the city's budget. And also, yeah, oh, did we lose Bria? Because I also wanted to see if Bria had anything.
Hi, yeah, sorry. I had to log in with my phone. I was having bad connection problems. But I'm here.
Okay, no, thank you, Bria. I just wanted to see if you had anything to add or any insights. I know you've been working on this too.
Yeah, no, I think what everybody has already presented is pretty sums up what I've been thinking about as well. And definitely would be interested in like the account numbers to see what that has. And I guess we could do a bit more tinkering with the data, because we do see a lot of CS title assignments, and maybe like putting them in more general groups and visualizing it that way. would be helpful for people, as well as just thinking about with the data that we do have, what was happening, you know, in LA during those times, and using that, the data that we have, and comparing it to other things such as healthcare, housing, seeing what programs got funded or defunded in comparison to the LAPD budget might be helpful for people as well.
Yeah, I love that suggestion. I think that's great because, you know, even if it's incomplete, these budget docs tell a story. Like, it's money allocated to racist violence when it could have been allocated to other things. So even just mapping it alongside here in LA, we've seen houselessness grow exponentially, right, in these same years, unaddressed. Like, and we know we've needed resources somewhere else. So I think that's important. And even just thinking about, you know, you talked about what's going on, like events that are tied to this. We know that these big expansions come at the heels of, you know, reforms or uprisings or even just violent events. So like that MacArthur Park allocation for street vendors, like I'm curious. I really want to know what was going on with the criminalization of street vendors then, or, you know, body worn video. We know that was a whole thing in 2017 in response to police violence, and it hasn't stopped police violence, right? Yeah. So I think just adding that narrative component, and frankly, that's what I'm more curious about. Like, how can this tell a story? Although we still want the accountants and the more analytically minded to, find their golden nuggets in here.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that's so cool about this is, you know, that there are folks that would love to dig through this. And that's why it would be awesome to be able to get it in a way that we could share it, which I think Tableau does allow. So, but yeah, I think that's what we're talking about now in our group as well. Some of that stuff. So, yeah, I don't know if, were we good to kind of wrap it up, or am I being premature?
Yeah, I think so, unless anybody else has any questions. I do want to shout out Naoko and, you know, Bria for putting in that work, for plugging it into that interface, because I kid you not, y'all, we've had these docs for a minute. It's been like a couple of us just literally sifting through PDFs and manually pulling line items. And so even this, looking something up in a search bar has been a game changer. So thank you for all the work y'all have put in. And yeah, plug in, please come join the fight.
Yeah, that's right. And the group meets again tomorrow. We meet on Wednesdays at 3 p.m. Sometimes it's just quick check-ins. Other times we talk for an hour or a little bit more, but it's usually just kind of consistent check-ins, which is nice, I think. So is that about right, Matios, in terms of, okay, cool. So folks are welcome to plug in there, check in with us there, and we can definitely use the help, and would love to hear more thoughts from folks about that. So yeah, I think that's it on that one. Thanks everyone on that one. Okay, so now it is 6:48. What we'll do is next, I just wanted to share with folks, as I said, kind of with that defund surveillance working group, we have been kind of taking the time to spend on the documents and looking at the data itself. But then to go with that, we're thinking about, okay, how can we engage in storytelling? And so sometimes sometimes it's also just like, what are we learning about this type of technology? What do we want to be sharing with folks about this technology? But also thinking about kind of what are we learning about the bigger picture of LAPD's relationship with tech and also tech companies, and also how over the years, both LAPD and tech companies, as well as other actors, have been opportunistic in terms of really taking advantage of, when police violence does occur, which is ongoing, of course, but when there is like these calls for reform, these calls for transparency, how tech companies kind of jump into that gap when people are not demanding answers in the form of additional tech or additional surveillance, but what gets pushed forward when people are demanding change to societal issues is we get these tech solutions pushed at us. So just kind of taking a look at how that happens. And so one of the like deep dives that we've been doing recently is taking a look at Axon. So Axon, so I'll get into that right now. Axon used to be called TASER International, and I'm assuming that folks are familiar with what is a TASER. Yeah. Don't think I really need to explain, but essentially a device that is used to shoot barbs. Yeah, not too familiar, but yeah. Well, actually, why don't I just get started and we can get into it. So I think I can probably share screen. I have like a number of slides. I'm going to try not to get like too detailed and also be just pausing and checking in with folks along the way. Okay. Okay. So LAPD and TASER International, which is now known as Axon. So the story of TASER and LAPD goes back to 1979. And this is when LAPD actually killed Yulia, I believe is how her name is pronounced, May Love, in Watts. This was a shooting where Yulia was a mom living in Watts, had 3 kids, recently lost her husband, and bill collectors were on site looking to be paid for like a $22 gas bill or utility bill. And Yulia was very upset by this and responded to them in anger. Police were called to the scene and ended up shooting and killing Yulia on the spot. This led to a lot of outrage. And so in response to this, and in response to all of the protests that happened, LAPD, as we often see when we have these protests against police violence, they were forced into a position where they had to come up with some type of reform. So one of the responses that police came up with was that they would take a look at non-lethal weapons. So they said, okay, we haven't been looking at alternatives to the gun so far, but we're being pushed in that direction. So this is what we're going to start looking for. So they started doing this analysis, doing a search for non-lethal weapons. And let's see. So what they came to was the TASER. This is something that had just been created. It was still kind of in the testing stages, and the person that had even created this device hadn't figured out who was even going to purchase it. LAPD took a look at the TASER, actually tested it out on the streets of Los Angeles, asked for some modifications to be made to it, and then placed an order for the TASER. And right away, that kind of began their relationship with this device. And they became the largest, of course, law enforcement agency that was using it at that time. And the way that this, again, was launched and the way that this was put out to folks was, oh, this is an alternative to guns. This is going to reduce police use of force. This is going to reduce those shootings and killings by police. So that was kind of how they became introduced, how they first started using the TASER. And then if we look into, okay, so what were the amount of fatal shootings at that time? These numbers are not super reliable just because they didn't have a really good reporting system at that time. But this is what the LA Times had on record. So you can see some of these numbers. And some of the changes, and Bria, I know that you're on the phone. I think you're not able to see I'm not sure if you're able to see the screen actually. But basically in 1977, LAPD killed 33 people, and this was just by shooting alone. 1978, 20 people. In 79, it was 14 people. And in 1980, it was 15 people. And there were a number of different changes that were going on at that time. So the police commission, the DA were trying different things. And actually 1977 was when they started doing what they called rollout, which is when police would shoot someone, they would immediately send out someone from the DA's office to go and talk to police right away. Because what they had been doing before that was they would just wait to hear from police, to hear from them what happened, and they wouldn't like send anybody out. So there were a lot of different changes going on at this time. And I found a paper that cited these statistics. And this was actually, it was interesting. It was written by Craig Uchida, who we are familiar with because of his relationship with LAPD. But he was writing a paper at the time in 1981 about the policy, stating that an aggressive shooting policy is quite legal in most states and should not be punished with prosecution. So this was kind of how it was viewed at the time. And also this is about when they did make a change to like shooting policy. It was actually very like wide open previous to this. And it was around that time that they changed it to say like, to be more specific and to kind of try to limit police officers a bit. But as it says here, shooting unarmed fleeing suspects in the back, for example, is legal for police in more than half the states. So doing this part just to say, like, as we are looking at the TASER, you know, being promoted as this is something that is going to, you know, this is being promised as a reform for the gun, like, oh, it's going to stop police from shooting and killing people so much. So it's like, okay, well, what was going on at that time? So this is some of what had been going on at that time. Then this next snapshot basically is just documenting, having laid that groundwork that we just kind of heard about the TASER. These are all the people that were killed by police with TASERs just in Los Angeles from 1983 to 1991. So we see a number of folks here. I didn't research if all of these were LAPD. I assume that some may be other police departments as well, but essentially this is not a non-lethal device. Then coming up to 1991, we again see TASER in the news. We again see TASER in the news because Rodney King beaten by police, and one of the reasons that police gave for why they kept beating him was that the TASER that they were using was not working. They were saying it was not strong enough. They were using a Tasertron that was made by TASER International. And so kind of what followed from that was that there were a lot of changes for TASER, the company. In 1993, it was it lost a lot of business that decade. It was, I believe, purchased by the now CEO of the company, Rick Smith. So it was purchased by them, and he began kind of remaking the company at that time. In 1999, it was renamed. And then in 2001, they replaced that Tasertron that, you know, the world had got to know as the one that had failed to keep Rodney King down, that was how police were viewing this device. They replaced it with a different TASER that was 4 times more powerful. So that was the technology that they developed at that time, and what that was in response to. Okay, and then looking at 2005. So by this time, just taking a look at, okay, how much were they actually using this? Looking at only non-categorical use of force, which is kind of the less severe category of force. It's still incredibly severe, like it should not be downplayed at all. It's bad. But in terms of like LAPD has categorical use of force, which is like you have nearly been killed or you have been killed. And then non-categorical, they're saying that of that non-categorical use of force, TASERs were used about 11% of the time. So again, this type of information just gives us snapshots in terms of like how much it was being used. They're looking at new models. They're constantly testing. That's another thing we see when we look at LAPD information, is that Axon throughout this time has been constantly pilot testing new models. So they use LAPD and other police departments as a place that they can test out the technology, get feedback from them. Of course, it's community members that are having those tests run on them. And then as far as by 2006, so LAPD had 600 tasers, and they were using it about 3 to 5 times daily. And so again, the expectation, how it was being talked about was, still being said like, this is a device that we expect is going to be reducing the amount that police are having to use force. So still they have this faith in this device. About that time, there was also research from various sources, because TASER was continuing to, the device was continuing to kill people nationwide. Hundreds of people had been killed by this device. Different lawsuits had been filed, and research had demonstrated that there is substantial risk to a person. A person can be killed by using a TASER on them. And again, these are individuals who had been killed by TASERs just in Los Angeles. So it's not that this was not known. It was very much known that this was not a non-lethal device. And then what all of that sets the stage for is that essentially this device has been killing a lot of people. People are filing lawsuits about it. There's a lot of uproar about it to the company, and the company is pushing back and saying, well, these are not lethal devices. And to prove that, or to try to say, well, let's actually why don't we actually see what's going on? They start developing and demonstrating using the TASER cam. The TASER cam is a device that would go on the TASER. It's exactly what it sounds like, and would essentially record for short bursts of time while the TASER was being used. And again, the whole notion of it was to provide footage of what is really going on. And just in terms of the political landscape at this time as well, this was a time where LAPD was also looking at different types of technology. They were looking at different types of surveillance. Digital in-car video was something that the department was reviewing at the same time. And they were saying, okay, we're getting all these accusations of racial profiling at the same time, as well as these accusations of that your officers are using too much force. So to go along with that, they were saying, okay, well, this TASER cam, this seems like a good device that can help us prove that police are not actually using excessive force. At the same time that they were looking at the digital in-car video. So at that time, they were looking at spending about $7 million on TASERs. That was in 2006. Then they decided to scale that back, not spend as much money. And then the next year, they ended up getting 2,500 TASERs. Again, these are devices that continue to be killing people, not really being effective, not really being useful. And then the next year is when TASER publicly launched this paper where it kind of lays out its defense of saying, okay, TASERs cannot kill people. This is all the medical, these are all the medical studies that have been done. And it's like a 92-page paper that is it's extremely, it's really poorly written, actually. It's coming from a very defensive place. And essentially, they're just here are all the papers that say that this can't possibly be true. It's very argumentative in tone. So it kind of lays out no, TASERs aren't actually killing people. And then this is also the place where TASER lifts the condition excited delirium and they talk about what this is, and they try to kind of cement okay, this is an actual condition that exists that police are responding to. And I'll just pause and check for questions. Do folks know what excited delirium is? I think it's also called, there's another name for it as well. which I can't remember what the other name for it is. But yeah, essentially, so excited delirium is something that, and I believe this is something that they described Rodney King being affected with excited delirium, but it's essentially, it's a condition that has been contrived or made up that is said to have been observed. It is something that is believed in by like certain individuals, certain organizations, and most commonly police departments are those who believe that this is something that exists. And they're saying that this is a medical condition often associated with cocaine use, where somebody is kind of in this altered state of awareness. They're in this kind of hyper state of arousal. They have superhuman strength. It's very hard to take them down. They can't feel pain. Like all of these things are what they describe about excited delirium. And something that is really interesting about this that I just realized today is that the assertion, and I'm not sure if this is how everyone views it, but the assertion that TASER is making, and they make this a few different times, is that when you are in a state of excited delirium, this is actually a fatal state already. You are on your way to dying. And the CEO of, I see you, Matios, the CEO of TASER has actually said, like when questioned, like how can you explain all of these deaths by TASER? He said every single one of those people would have died anyway. And as we see from this like little excerpt, what they're stating is that this is a fatal state. Like once you are in that state of excited delirium, that is fatal, you will die. Matios?
Yeah, no, that's gross. And yeah, I also just wanted to, most of the people they're talking about when, most of the people experiencing excited delirium are Black. And I just did really want to tie this to the history of like anti-Blackness and like eugenics that we see from the LAPD. This specifically always makes me think about that Daryl Gates quote where Daryl Gates was chief of the LAPD leading up to even during the Rodney King uprisings, rebellion, but he's famously, there was a lot of attention around the LAPD killing Black people through chokeholds. And, he explicitly says Blacks might be more likely to die from chokeholds because their arteries do not open as fast as they do in normal people. And so excited delirium always makes me think like, this is in the same tradition of, creating a pathology that's in line with the LAPD's dehumanization of Black people. And so we see it time and time again. But yeah, that's always where my mind goes, is this justification pseudoscientifically that, yeah. And I'll drop the scene where we talk about that in the chat.
I'm sorry, say that again, Matios?
I'll drop our chief scene where we talk about that in the chat.
That would be great. That's a really awesome zine as well. Yeah, no, that's so true. And it's really gross to see that LAPD still publishes trainings around excited delirium and like identifying it. And it is really, yeah, it's extremely concerning to see them publishing like, oh, this is a thing and you should be cautious for looking out for individuals who may be experiencing this, especially things like saying, oh, this person has superhuman strength, like all these things, like, that's just asking for and setting it up for using, excessive use of force, of course, or viewing someone as a threat. Like I could see it. And yeah, it's just, and so I think something that we are interested in doing is looking more at like how many deaths at LAPD have been attributed to excited delirium, because it's at least I would say several a year, like it's at least one a year. And it's usually killing, like there's usually a taser involved in that death. And as you mentioned, Matios, it is usually like it's highly correlated with the death of Black people in custody. Like that is consistently the thing that excited delirium is most often associated with, and it's the death of Black men in custody by police. So it would be interesting to just look a little more at that. But yeah, it's very gross to see kind of this progression of this company that is, you know, come onto the scene with this device saying, oh, it's less lethal, it's less lethal. And then it's actually being used to kill people. It's being used by police to kill people. And then kind of lifting up, well, no, it's this other thing that's called excited delirium that's going on. And you were going to die anyway. And kind of publishing information about it. And then, so all of that. And then what happens next is, so now they've been testing out the taser cam that goes on the taser, which is in response to them saying questions about like, oh, you're using too much force. Okay, well, we're going to put a camera on the taser to show that it's not. Then, so this company then expands into the body camera. They go from putting it on the taser, and they are actually the first ones to develop a body worn video. So that's where they go next. So yeah, essentially this is Taser now transitioning from just using tasers to now moving into like surveillance technology. So during this time, again, if we're like, okay, well, is this actually reducing the number of people that LAPD is killing? No, it is not. LAPD are still killing many people every year, and they kill them through various types of ways. Probably at least 5 people are killed in custody every year as well. That's not even part of these numbers. So this is kind of ongoing as these tech companies are like launching new products. 2014. So this is a year where there was a lot of like nationwide call for reform, a lot of protest. Michael Brown, Ezell Ford were murdered by police, and body worn video, I think, was brought out at that time as like, oh, this is something that we can use and put on police that will help to hold police accountable. So at that time, LAPD kind of seized on this moment, and the police commission, they tested 2 different models of body worn video on Skid Row residents. So this was only used by Central Division Police, and it was used by the Safer Cities Initiative Police, which patrols Skid Row. So we know who that is impacting and being tested on. Taser did end up winning that contract. So in 2014, LAPD became the largest police department to outfit its officers with the body worn video, and also evidence.com, which is a database where what you're capturing on that video is uploaded to evidence.com so it can be captured and held safe for prosecution of people or for reviewing in case you need it later to make a case. So this is kind of where they're expanding to. And then also what we see is that at that time, Taser took LAPD testaments about the product, and specifically it was like Dan Gomez with LAPD, who is the head of like tech. I forget his proper title there, but stating that, yes, what we're seeing is that we are seeing a change in behavior from people that police encounter when they have the body worn, when cops have the body worn video on. And this is something that I say that specifically because he would walk that back 2 years later, saying, no, actually, we don't see any change in behavior. It's like people may be taken aback when they first see the camera, but then it's like right away, it's like back to whatever it was you were doing, or because you're usually in a crisis is what's going on. So, but essentially, how Axon was taking the testimony and those words from LAPD and using it to actually put in their pitch packages to other departments as well. Okay, so yeah, essentially they're keeping expanding. So 2015, 3,000 additional tasers for LAPD. 2016, more Axon cameras, more tasers for all officers, $28 million contract for more body cameras, 5-year subscription, and then also the company officially rebranded as Axon, which is now a data gathering and data storage solutions company. So this is kind of what they've grown to be. And again, that has been very much part of that has been by testing its product on community members who are people who live in these communities where these devices are being deployed. So just kind of this constant pilot testing a product and the company kind of reaping the benefits from that as well. Meanwhile, while of course, nobody is any safer. So October 17, LAPD gets a contract to be an official intelligence partner. And then Axon reports record revenues, $90 million in the third quarter of 2017. They start developing additional products, a smart sensor for your device, for your firearm that will alert body cameras in the area once you take it from your holster. So they're kind of working on new products at the same time. And then looking at LAPD and Axon today. So yeah, so in 2021, what we see in terms of like how much are they being utilized, it's still about 11% of the time. It has seen a decrease in recent years. At the same time, LAPD has just renewed its contract for more TASER devices, or for the most recent upgrade of TASERs, and to get more body cameras. And so they are now the largest energy weapon deployment in the US, LAPD is. And then Axon continuing to kind of report these great results. And then most recently this year, they are now expanding, building on that contract that they had with LAPD with body-worn video, expanding it into now they're going to be packaging the body-worn video with the in-car recording devices. And also they're going to have ALPR license plate scanners on the cars as well. And all of that is going to be attached to evidence.com. So kind of continuing to expand in terms of the different types of surveillance and technology that they're offering and that they're getting from LAPD. Okay, this is the last slide. So yeah, so essentially like takeaways and main themes. So it's like, okay, well, there's all of that, but what does that, like, is that useful to learn more about or to understand or consider? So some of the things that we see from that is kind of how, again, how the company has grown over time, kind of used different calls for reform, times when people were demanding changes to the nature of police and demanding to not be murdered by police anymore and to not have this brutality against them. And the city leadership and tech companies kind of seized on that and said, okay, well, we have a tech solution for that instead, kind of plugged it in that way. And then what we see is really nothing is changing on the community side of it. However, like these companies get further entrenched in terms of the types of surveillance that they're offering and how like growing into different markets as well. So like those are some of the takeaways that I see. I'll pause and see. Sorry, that was a lot of talking, folks. Do folks have any thoughts on this? Or also, is this type of thing useful as well? Like, again, I think we are trying to understand like what is some of that. What are some of those deep dives that we can be doing, perhaps around specific types of reform, to be taking a deeper look at like, okay, what was the actual outcome of this? What did actually happen versus what they said happened? So I guess, are these types of analyses useful, or do folks have any questions? Matios.
Sorry, I feel like, yeah, I'm talking a lot, but no, this is incredible, Tiff. Thank you for gathering all this information together. And I think Axon is just like a really great case study on like why reform doesn't work, you know, and I feel like that, you know, at least at the coalition, that's really something we talk about a lot, how we don't believe in reform. We actively organize against reform, and we believe in abolition. And Axon TASER is a perfect example of a corporation that sees the true function of reform as like, you know, the horrible shit happens, people want to hold LAPD accountable, and they see dollar signs. They're on the ready with body-worn video. as recently as the Uvalde shootings in Texas, Axon was ready to jump on the opportunity with a drone that also shot tasers, and that resulted in part of their board walking away. But that's literally, it's emblematic of what reform actually is, and also what corporations relationships with reform and racist violence and tragedy and the death of our loved ones are. It's an opportunity to make more money. So I think this is great.
Yeah, Ray, please go ahead.
I'm really wondering what evidence.com, I mean, what kind of data, obviously, so what kind of data does evidence.com have, and who has access to this data? Of course, there's a California law that California Consumer Protection, I think Act, CCPA, that allows us to ask, I'm not sure which agencies, police departments, government agencies, question mark. I kind of doubt it. Is there a loophole that we don't have the ability to ask them where they dig up my image for me walking in front or even engaging with a police officer at some point? And what do they do with that information? So here we have this private company having access to all video from almost the beginning of time of body worn cameras, and does something with it that we have absolutely no idea what. And I know particular algorithms can do facial recognition, and probably link it up with cross analyze that with other databases and so forth. But I mean, what's going to happen in the future? This is computer vision algorithms that are being developed. There was a key person who developed the technology in the early stages who had quit working on computer vision because he didn't like where it was headed. So there's an ethical issue with this technology. And so that's what I'm kind of wondering for sure. I mean, okay, maybe I trust some government agencies. Maybe do I trust law enforcement agencies? Well, I'm not going to answer that. But do I trust companies with this data? For sure, the answer is no. And so anyway, that's kind of what's on the top of my mind there, which all of this is opaque. There is no checks and balances in a democracy for this. And I pass.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's a really good point. I had forgotten, like, I know very little about evidence.com, and that would be good to know more about that. So yeah, so that's a good reminder. Thank you. Yeah, I don't have any more to add on that. But yeah, thank you for that reminder, Ray, because that's something that we can look into more to learn about, and would probably be surprised by some of the answers. Any other questions or comments, folks? And also if folks are interested in, like, what should we look at next? Like, yeah, I know Motorola we're interested in because I think that Motorola has kind of a similar relationship. I'm not sure if it's been as experimental, but I can't really remember. Matios, is your hand newly up or? Yeah.
Yeah, it is newly up. I'm sorry. No, I just wanted to talk about what Ray was just saying in regards to evidence.com. We recently, a few coalition members went to a screening of a movie called All Light Everywhere by this director, Theo Anthony. The reason we went is they featured our name on the poster, and they hadn't talked to any of us. So it was part bird dog, but also just part we want to see what the movie was about. And, we had our criticisms. This is by no means an endorsement of the film, All Light Everywhere by Theo Anthony. But one thing it did do really well is showcase Axon as a company and like their arsenal of shit. And one of the things they featured in the film was evidence.com and the amount of metadata it kind of captured, how like each individual file was tagged a certain way, each individual thing it captured was like filed a certain type of way. And to your point, Ray, like they're for sure storing that data and breaking it down, and like using that for profit, right? And that's why I think there's unlimited storage is what they said in the film, like for police agencies to upload information to evidence.com. And a lot of that is because that data is, profitable. So yeah, I just wanted to echo that. And if folks want to see that movie, it's All Light Everywhere by Theo Anthony. Yeah, it's all right.
So ringing endorsement.
Let me bring up just one other point about sample bias. So who is likely to be in front of a cop so that your likeness would be recorded, and who is not likely to be in front of a cop? And so anyway, I'll just leave it at that. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm glad you raised that. I know that's something that Peter has talked to us about, like in talking about like the records management system. I think is database bias an actual term as well, Ray? Or I'm not sure, but
I have heard that. I've kind of heard the subsets of database bias, but yeah.
okay. Yeah, just in terms of like, yeah, whose information is being gathered, and then what happens to that, and is that being understood that what you have is a very specific set of information that is being treated a certain way, and what is the impact of that? And of course, I don't think that ever gets acknowledged. So that's a really good point. Okay, well, I think we can keep it moving, but yeah, essentially, I think I had a slide on here saying just join. Yeah, so essentially, those were kind of some of the updates from our defund surveillance and architecture surveillance working groups. They're kind of working closely together. Could be considered sample bias. Okay. Are you saying, Ryan, that is database bias not a thing? That sounds made up. Probably it's the same as sample bias. But yeah, okay. But yeah, essentially, these are updates from those two groups. We are kind of just like working together because they kind of inform each other. So again, we meet on Wednesdays. Folks are welcome to plug in with that group if you like. And if you'd like to help us looking more into different types of surveillance tech and kind of how they have been developed over time, used against community over time, we are very interested in kind of looking at that. Oh, your mic isn't working. Okay, sorry. Well, thank you. But yeah, we are very interested in looking at that on a local level, which there is, a lot of information about, and how companies do work with LAPD specifically, and how LAPD kind of sets itself up for that. Yeah, thank you, Ray. So yeah, if folks are interested in kind of helping us look at that, or have any suggestions for things that they'd like to learn more about, we would love to hear that as well. Yeah, I think other than that, we were going to check in on a couple of updates with any of the groups. I don't really know that we need to do this much. Yeah, I don't know what your thoughts are, Matias. I know that I had thought that Shakir may be present and may be able to offer an update, but I don't think, well, obviously that's not. So yeah, I don't know if we want to, I mean, I can do like a 2-minute update on the Sarah one. So I don't know if you want to update on anything as well, and you also don't have to.
Yeah. Well, we've got I'd love to talk about our repeal Special Order 11 campaign we got going on right now.
Please do then. Do you want to do that right now?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, cool.
So after the George Floyd uprisings, we know there were 3 reports that were pretty critical of the LAPD, how they handled the protests. And in response to that, and in response to calls for the LAPD to be defunded, for police to be abolished, the LAPD said, hey, you know what we need? We need more oversight, especially around surveillance technology. And so kind of anticipating this, a bunch of Los Angeles community groups led by Stop LAPD Spying, including Los Angeles Community Action Network, Black Lives Matter LA, even the ACLU, SoCal, and a bunch of other groups, over 24, wrote a letter saying, we don't want any oversight around surveillance technologies. We know that doesn't work. If anything, we want to ban on these surveillance technologies. Calls were for defunding and abolition, not for this. And even this oversight model was based on a model created by the ACLU called CCOPS, which stands for Community Control Over Police Surveillance. And so even ACLU SoCal wrote a letter saying, hey, we developed this model. It doesn't work. Don't implement it. And they sent it to the Board of Police Commissioners. So lacking any, community input, what the LAPD did is they imported community input from Oakland through this guy, Brian Hofer, who works for this group called Secure Justice, or he founded it. And we have emails, and I'll find the link and post it in the chat. We actually uploaded those PRAs where the LAPD explicitly says, Brian, you're going to be the community's voice here in LA. All right, that's why we're bringing you down here, which is absurd because he's not even from here. And increasingly more absurd is the fact that Brian Hofer had implemented the CCOPS model in his home base of Oakland, and it didn't work. He was actually in the middle of suing the Oakland Police Department because it didn't work. But he felt moved to bring that shit down here to LA. And so recently, the LAPD passed this kind of surveillance audit and approval system, kind of in the same vein. They gave it the special order number 11. So we just dropped a toolkit yesterday. And we're not even appealing to the Board of Police Commissioners anymore. We're demanding that City Council repeals this special order because they have the power to do so. And we're highlighting the fact that the Board of Police Commissioners has consistently been a rubber stamp body and just blindly approved whatever the LAPD wants. And so we have a list of City Council members that we want folks to call. There's a script there. You can change it up however you want, or like put it into your own words. Don't change it up however you want. And there's also an email template folks can use along with some tweets. They're click to tweet, just click them and they'll tweet them out for you. And I'll drop the link to that in the chat right now. It'd be great if folks could also amplify our Instagram post on the matter. And we'll most likely be having an in-person action to amplify this on the week of October 10th. So look out for that.
That's great. I did not know that we had just launched that. That's great. Cool. Do folks have any questions on that? We've been talking about that for a while because it was kind of being rolled out for a little bit, but that's good that we have this toolkit now. Cool. Thank you. Yeah, so I'll just share one last update because we did recently get some documents back with regard to one of our working groups. We do have a number of different working groups within our fight. And yeah, we won't talk about all of them right now because we've already talked about a few of them. But there is one called the SARA group. SARA stands for, SARA is actually representative of LAPD's so-called problem-solving approach to policing, and it is how it has targeted locations for additional policing. And of course, when you target locations, you're also targeting the people at that location. So LAPD has this name for this approach. It's called SARA, which is a 4-stage process: scanning, analysis, response, assessment. And this is the 4 stages that it goes through for each of these locations. This is not a new process. This is something that it has done previously. It even did it in Operation Laser, which is a program that was ultimately shut down because it was so targeted and racist and destructive, even by their own standards. But this so-called problem-solving approach is still something that has been carried over. We have been demanding information from LAPD to learn where are these different locations this is being done. We have some of those locations. We've just gotten additional information back. So from Hollenbeck Division, which polices Boyle Heights and Ramona Gardens and other areas, and also Central Division, which polices downtown and the Skid Row area. We have now got information about where were they targeting with this program in 2020. So if folks are interested in taking a look at those with us or kind of joining our team and plugging in on that, that would be great. And please contact us and let us know. And that is really it. And I'm sorry, I was pausing to see. I thought I had frozen, but I hadn't. I only have Matios to go off of. And we are wrapping it up, folks. I think, are there any community announcements? Anything folks want to raise? All right, I think that may be it for the evening then. Matias, did you have anything else to add? All right. Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us, folks. We're really glad to have you with us, and look forward to the next time. And that's it. Have a good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Bria. Bye-bye.